So there seems to be something seriously wrong happening inside Russia's regime. A man who has stood at Putin's side for more than 2 decades, who has spoken on behalf of Russia across the world, is suddenly nowhere to be seen. Sergey Lavrov, foreign minister for over 20 years, infamous for his comments of the Ukraine war, the West, the international order, is missing meetings, being stripped of major duties, and there is complete silence about it. And when there is complete silence in Moscow from Putin, you know there's a genuine issue, that there is a potential drama. So this isn't just about one minister going missing or being diminished in his role. It's a sign that the Kremlin itself is starting to eat its own, that the catch-up of what is happening to the Russian economy and Putin's war in Ukraine is unsustainable. It's unraveling before our eyes. I've seen this pattern before in Russia's corridors of power, and it rarely ends quietly. So in this video, I wanted to talk about these sudden discussions, where Lavrov is, what is going on, and why it points to paranoia, the verge of collapse, and the slow implosion of Putin's regime. Because this time could be the start of something genuinely important.
This is the Global Gambit.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel with this sudden important update video. Usually I do a video a day, but this headline came out as I was recording the other one yesterday about Pokrovsk, and I consider it to be such a genuine point of importance that, well, here we are with this relatively rough and ready round the edges video, which I wanted to discuss about what is going on with Sergey Lavrov. Because if we see Putin's actual power structure beginning to wobble, then there's a few key distinctions that we'll get to in a moment, but there is important developments there. But do you think this is important or not? Let me know in the comments below, and let's get into it. So very quickly, Sergey Lavrov has been important. He's been at the height of Russian foreign policy for years, but there are a few key distinctions. And this disappearance, well, he's not going to be attending the G20 summit. That's basically the point. But it's still rather unusual and interesting as well how quickly the Kremlin has been to insist that there's nothing wrong. Dmitry Peskov, the spokesman for the Kremlin, quickly said to journalists, Russian as well as the remnants of whatever Western ones there are, that absolutely Lavrov is still the foreign minister. But if you know how Moscow works, that's exactly when you should start worrying or questioning it. Because in Russia, denial is a signal, it's not a reassurance. Every regime in history is built on fear lied to with admissions. And right now, the most loyal servants, and that's a key distinction here, are suddenly, well, disappearing. Now, this is how power fades in Russia. Not with a gunshot or resignation, but with these quiet rearrangements or perhaps bigger purges as we've seen in the 90s. Generals aren't fired in Putin, they're reassigned. Think of Shoigu being moved from the Ministry of Defense to the National Security Council. Oligarchs aren't punished, they retire. And ministers don't get dismissed, they simply stop appearing in public. Unless they fall out of a window. It's the old Soviet playbook, basically. Purge without the spectacle, built on the purges of the 1930s, that being said. Now, Lavrov has survived longer than most. He is 75, a relic of Soviet diplomacy. He's fluent, sharp, respected even by those who despise Moscow's policies, and he's been through every crisis that you can imagine. Georgia, Crimea, Syria, Ukraine. The last link to an area when Russian diplomacy still pretended to be rational, some would argue. But now he is increasingly being sidelined to people on the inside. And that tells you something fundamental about where Putin's Russia is heading, more specifically, Putin's mind is heading. So what's actually been going on? Well, firstly, Lavrov missed last week's critical Security Council meeting, the only permanent member absent. And whilst Putin was musing about these resumed full nuclear testing suggestions, which I'll be covering in another video because it's, well, traditional hot air. Days later, the Kremlin announced that Lavrov won't lead Russia's delegation to the G20, being replaced by a little-known bureaucrat known as Maxim Oreshkin, and something that Lavrov has done on a yearly basis because Putin cannot go because of the ICC warrant, but also because it is the most important foreign event, other than maybe Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Beijing, that Russia can attend, and is a pinnacle point of Putin's rhetoric around New World Order, building it around the Global South or anything that isn't purely reliant on the G7 and the West. And more broadly, for 2 weeks straight, the Foreign Ministry hasn't published a single detail of Lavrov's schedule, which they normally do. So it's quite unprecedented, you could argue. He's normally a constant presence. State TV clips, photo ops, press briefings. He's a bit of a pin-up for the anti-Western rhetoric. But right now, nothing. So when officials vanish like this, insiders start whispering, the rumours start spreading. Is it illness? Punishment? Or is there something more structural, darker at play? The signal of an approaching reshuffle, but what's that reshuffle based on? And that's, of course, where the story turns. Just weeks ago, Lavrov was trying to broker a new Putin-Trump summit in Budapest, Hungary. He called the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio to prepare it. But the very next day, Trump abruptly cancelled, saying it didn't feel right, which, well, for obvious reasons and what we've covered on the channel before. But behind the scenes, Washington had realised the Kremlin wouldn't ever soften its stance to Ukraine. Surprisingly, that should have come a lot sooner, but it is Trump we're talking about. Lavrov's hardline tone, described by some as tired and dismissive, made things worse. The talks collapsed, and with them, a rare chance for Putin to claim a diplomatic win. Now, in Putin's system, fails like that don't go unpunished, and when a regime starts running out of victories, it starts inventing traitors. And interestingly, whilst Lavrov's approach of hardline and perhaps stubbornness or impatience is often more utilised, in this case it was actually a counterproductive trait. Because here's the truth few inside Russia admit. Lavrov has never really been part of Putin's inner circle. The decisions like war, peace, sanctions, survival, critical decision-making are made by what's known as the Slaviki, the ex-spies and generals who now rule everything. And they don't trust diplomats. I mean, they barely trust each other, but Lavrov is a career diplomat. He studied at the most prestigious international relations school in Russia, or in some people's eyes, outside of the West. And whilst he's very skilled at what he does, that's all he is, a career diplomat. He's not a pinnacle decision maker. He's not a visionary, so to speak. Lavrov's ministry has been gutted. Policy has basically been stripped away, replaced by propaganda, and he's largely just become, as I've kind of alluded to, the primary spokesman for Russia that no longer negotiates, but only uses coercion. And now, after 20 years of loyalty, he's becoming a liability. His personality no longer reflective, or his approach no longer effective, and increasing that power stripped away and just given directly to the military, or the security services, the FSB, and, well, a reminder of the old system, where Russia still talked to the world instead of barking at it. So inside Moscow, that makes him dangerous, because Putin is increasingly paranoid and unsure where his true loyalties lie, and so his inner circle ever increasingly shrinks. So if even Lavrov can fall, no one is really safe. His disappearance marks the end of whatever balance has remained between Russian diplomats and its security hawks. It's the final triumph of fear over professionalism, loyalty over competence, a replacement of yes-men, something that people have argued is increasingly happening with Xi Jinping's regime in the CCP. So it's not really a reshuffle, it's a warning to everyone around Putin. Speak out, hesitate, show fatigue, stubbornness, or anything he doesn't like, and you'll vanish as well. Of course, it's still early days. Lavrov may well appear again, but the fact he hasn't for basically a couple of weeks is worth noting, and why I'm making this video. And it's what terrifies the Kremlin most. Not really NATO or the sanctions, but the slow erosion of loyalty inside its own ranks, the same as any dictatorship in history. Once fear stops working, regimes like this just begin to crumble, even one as effective as Putin's over the past 25 plus years. So what happens now then? Well, as I say, Lavrov may well appear again, shaking hands somewhere, smiling for the cameras, as if nothing ever happened. That's how the Kremlin does work. It shows you what it wants you to see until it doesn't. And Putin, despite what people say, has been very good at sidestepping and still enabling the resilience of the Russian economy, for example. But every disappearance leaves a scar. Each one chips away a little bit more of that illusion of control. And sooner or later, people notice that the system built on loyalty is devouring its most loyal servants. More Russians are cognizant of the fact that, well, energy prices are obscene and things are being rationed. Does that mean the country is going to implode or overnight collapse? No, it doesn't. But this is a direction that is increasingly gaining momentum. And that's why it matters, because if even the face of Russian diplomacy can vanish overnight, it means the entire centre is not really holding anymore. And I can tell you this, as someone who's grown up between these two worlds, once paranoia becomes policy, this isn't far behind. And no, that doesn't mean I've lived in a paranoid, schizophrenic kind of house. It just simply means that studying this and being in the country for the many years that I have, it gives you a certain sense of familiarity that Russians have become used to, or at least the government operates in. So what do you think, though? Is Lavrov's silence a sign of deeper fractures inside the Kremlin, or is it just another act in Putin's theatre of control, and because he's not really part of the Slaviki, the inner circle, it doesn't have the same meaning yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let the algorithm know you enjoyed this video, which I hope you did, by giving it a like, and of course subscribing. It's all free. And if you enjoyed it even more, you've been a part of the community for longer, do check out the links below if you want to support me with a one-time coffee, become a member, or just, well, share it with some friends who need to know what's actually going on. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.